Hello, hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host, Keegan. And this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And I've got a question for you. Have you ever kind of just wanted to avoid the shadowy places? Do you go to the shadowy places looking for enjoyment or something along those lines? Well, there are places most people avoid. The places where pain has left fingerprints on the walls and silence hums like an echo of everything lost. But for Dr. Chad Scott, those places became invitations. A therapist, author, and educator, and a liver transplant survivor, Chad has walked through Auschwitz, Ground Zero, and the shadowed corners of history, not to glorify tragedy, but to uncover what it can teach us about healing. After nearly losing everything, his health, his marriage, and his sense of self, he discovered that standing in the presence of humanity's darkest moments can sometimes shine the brightest light on what it means to be alive. So, Dr. Chad Scott, how are you doing today, my friend?
I am doing great, Keegan. I'm so happy to be here. I've been looking forward to this all week, and yeah, just excited to talk with you guys.
Sweet. Well, for everyone at home that may be catching the live stream, we were live earlier. We had some technical difficulties. It's Riverside. What else do you expect with a remote studio? They do as best as they can, but sometimes we
Yeah.
just have glitches. But with that being said, Dr. Chad Scott, what exactly is your book about? And was it about your liver transplant?
My liver transplant plays a little role in my book, but it's really about um, my life story. Of it's a memoir,
Mm-hmm.
and I talk about how my life was pretty good for the most part up until about 10 years ago when I started getting sick with autoimmune issues,
Mm,
and I had a type called vasculitis.
mm,
And Harold Ramis from the Ghostbusters died of vasculitis. So it
mm,
can be a deadly disease, and they weren't sure if mine was a deadly type.
mm-hmm.
And the treatment for that type is basically chemotherapy for the rest of your life.
Oof.
And so I started getting. I've always probably had more anxiety than I really cared to admit,
Yeah.
and I think I kept a good lid on it. But
Mm-hmm.
during that time, it just it was became undeniable. It was a problem.
Uh-huh.
Between my illness and my anxiety, my marriage, which was like, I married the love of my life. I mean, she was great, and we had 10,
Mhm.
11 great years, and that just was too much for her. So
Mm,
she left, and yeah, and I kind of dove into alcohol.
mm,
I come from Northeast Minnesota, a place called the
mhm.
Iron Range, and we are heavy drinkers up here. And I played right along, even though I've been a therapist my whole
Mhm,
adult life. I've been in the mental health field since 2000, and
mhm,
taught psychology since 2006, or 2003.
mhm.
And but therapists have issues too, just like anybody
Yeah.
else. And yeah, I really started hitting the I don't want to say the bottle, the can.
Mm,
Miller Lite was my drug of choice,
eef.
and yeah, hit that pretty hard. And I didn't know at the time I had an underlying liver disease,
Mm,
and that just put it over the edge. So I ended up
oof.
I went into the ER a couple of times with stomach pains, and they said, "Oh, it's just it's gastritis, or it's
Mm,
just take these over the counter pills."
uh-huh,
And I finally went in and kind of demanded, like, I need some answers. This is not
uh-huh.
just a normal stomach ache.
Yeah.
And they did an ultrasound, and I got a call one day saying, "You have severe cirrhosis,"
Oof.
and my life changed in a
Oof.
hurry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my book, getting back
Uh-huh.
to that, my book is that story, but
Okay.
also how I've gone to these historically dark places around the world, and especially when I was going through the darkest hours of my own life, how going to those places actually, I went there, out of what I thought was my interest in history. I like to
Mhm.
go honor people's suffering. As a therapist, I really am intrigued by human stories of suffering, and
Yeah.
how people got through those, and how, and why people maybe didn't, and
Mhm.
reflecting on that stuff. But what you find is you see little pieces of yourself when you go through there. And when you
Oh.
have your darkest times in your life, and I had a really dark time. At one point I was diagnosed with liver cancer, even though it ended up being a
Mm.
false positive.
Whew.
I For 9 months I thought I had liver cancer,
Hey,
which
no.
has a 5% survival rate.
Mm.
And what I found is, I had this anxiety,
Mhm.
and because of my experiences in those places, I think I really learned how to become a true stoic and
Hmm.
not let my fear of death and my fear of illness. And so I went through that whole time. So just remember, like 5 years prior to that, I was
Uh-huh.
absolutely miserable with anxiety. Couldn't have had a worse
Mm.
anxiety disorder.
Yeah.
And when I was going through the liver disease, I actually had almost no anxiety going through that. I
Huh.
just I became I from and I really attribute a lot of that to my reflections that I had in these really dark places.
Mhm.
And I think by honoring people's suffering, it almost comes back to gift you, and through those reflections, and you kind of carry the torch for people, and it
Mhm.
really allows you to, when you kind of take in their suffering when going through those places, it comes
Mhm.
back to you, to help you through your darkest hours.
Hmm. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And thank you for opening up about all that because I know that sometimes those really dark spots of our own past may not be the easiest to touch on or even talk about sometimes. So I really appreciate you just being open about that because I mean, I've got my own liver scares, but ignorance is bliss. What can I say?
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, when
uh,
when your doctor says, "Hey, you have fatty liver," which I just said, "Oh, everybody has fatty liver," but yeah, that fatty liver turned into cirrhosis pretty dang quick.
oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, real quick, what was one of the things that made you kind of so it was just your stomach that was being upset and you were like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
need to go to the ER, huh?"
Yeah,
Hmm.
looking back prior to
Mhm.
that,
Yeah.
I had, I struggled with being tired, and I just
Mm.
thought it was aging. I didn't really, so I would take a lot of naps during the day, and
Mhm.
what I found out is once I once I actually had a transplant, I had a
Mhm.
transplant in March of 2004,
Huh.
and yeah, so it wasn't very long ago, um, a year and a half, a little over a year and a half,
Mhm.
and but as soon as I got out of bed and could see the whites of my eyes, which I didn't realize how yellow they were
Aw.
actually.
Mhm.
I have a picture of a day before and a day after my transplant. My eyes, and I had no idea how bad my eyes were yellow. And as soon
Wow.
as I could see my eyes, it's like, oh my god! But I could tell my life was
Huh.
changed because I just felt so different. I mean, just
Mm.
having that new liver even for a day, I
Huh.
knew that oh my gosh, all these things that I had suffered before, they're gone.
Huh.
I'm not tired. I have endless energy. I just got back from 2 weeks on a tenting safari in Africa.
Huh.
Like literally got back Sunday. Um, yeah, so
Wow. Huh.
I mean, I'm living life, and before I wasn't.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you were able to see such a profound change in literally a day. And I
Yeah,
mean, that would be a scary part too, is because I know my eyes are not as wide as I'd like for them to be, like on the very, very outer parts and everything. And
yeah,
so it's
yeah.
like, yeah, but I don't really have anyone to blame but myself. And that's the biggest regret that I'd say I'd ever have is just throwing my health away, kind of like that. But you're able to now sit there and you've been through the fire and flames per se, but rather you've been through the shadows, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When we were talking earlier, I was talking about going through the
Mhm.
Paris catacombs, and I think that's a good example because
Uh-huh.
you would think the catacombs, where there's 6 million skeletons in the catacombs, you're walking
Mhm.
through just these piles of bones and skulls, and you walk through there and you see a skull and you think, this person had a name, they had a face, they had people that loved them, they loved people. What did they do as a job?
Mhm.
And and you have these reflections about, like, gosh, this is going to be me in not that many years, and you
Yeah.
walk out the other side of that,
Mhm.
and walking through darkness, and the darker the place, the more it really at least hits me.
Mhm.
For example, I start my book off with walking through the gas chamber at Auschwitz. There's one gas
Oof.
chamber that's called Crematorium One, and
Mhm.
it's the only one that's still standing today, I
Mhm.
believe. And you walk down in there, and it's just a big cement basement. Um,
Mhm.
and the nail scratches on the walls, and I mean
Mm,
and then my tour group kind of went through there because you have to go through with the tour group, and the tour group
mhm,
went to the next room fairly
mhm,
quick, and I couldn't. I just stopped in my tracks,
mm,
and I could just picture people falling one by one, men, women, children. I mean, the thousands of people that died in that very room,
mhm,
and right standing in the gas chamber, it
mhm.
was like I knew life was changed in that moment. I
Yeah.
knew I could not walk out the other side of that building and not be a changed person.
Mm,
And it wasn't. I mean, it was terrifying, yes.
yeah.
And then you walk into the next room and you
Mhm,
see the crematorium, um, the the furnaces,
mm,
and you see rail tracks going to the furnaces, and you're thinking like, I mean, this is the industrial scope of Auschwitz is just unbelievable. And then you walk
mhm,
out, which is a major relief when you walk out. But you feel like you carry those people's stories forward. I like from then on, I was
mhm,
much more um, aware of you know, for example, just wars around the world, and
mhm.
I've become more of an advocate, I think, for peace, and um, but also when you go through the darkness, whether it's the
Mhm,
catacombs or Auschwitz, walking through the darkness is the one of the quickest ways to changing your perspective in your own life, and it's one of the walking through the darkness illuminates life, and
mm,
they call that a memento mori.
mhm,
And a memento mori, actually, it came from the Romans, where Roman
mhm,
generals would they'd throw major parades for Roman generals,
mhm.
and they'd get really cocky. So they would hire a person to walk behind them. And when they got too cocky, this person would whisper in their ear, memento mori. And
Mm,
memento mori means, the Latin transition is remember you must die.
mm,
And that caught on in the Victorian era and the Elizabethan era, and with
mhm,
Christianity, and it became more of a remember you must die. And the flip of that coin is remember to live with great intention, love
mhm,
deeply, smell the roses. Everything is a little more beautiful when you walk through the darkness and you get to that other
mhm.
side.
Yeah.
And there's other ways maybe to do that.
Mhm,
I don't know how you feel about psychedelics, but that is
mm,
a big up and coming treatment in
mhm.
for PTSD. I
Yep.
was just at actually the book is right here. The Body Keeps the Score.
Yep.
Bezel Vanderkok. I went to his conference
Uh-huh.
a few months ago,
Mhm,
and that was kind of the biggest thing that they talked about is how psychedelics under certain conditions of a therapist and things like that can be
mhm.
really healing. Other ways is having a major illness, and
Yep.
and a lot of people that have had cancer or major heart attacks or things, they talk about how that has changed their perspective on their life, and they're going to
Mhm,
not take life for granted anymore, and you love deeper, and you're just a better person overall, I think, when you go through those things. Another one is they call it the overview effect, when astronauts go up and they see Earth
mhm.
and how small they are, and how small Earth is compared to the whole universe, and how they're just
Yeah.
like a little speck of dust on in a like a
Mhm.
speck of sand on a beach or whatever. And
Yep.
and that really changes how you see life. And dark tourism, without a doubt, does that.
Mm.
Yeah. So there's actually a really good book. It's more of an academic book, so
Mhm.
you kind of have to like academic type stuff. But
Yeah.
it's how dark tourism and religious pilgrimages are very similar.
Mm.
And you go into those places, especially
Uh-huh.
the really dark ones, and you ask the bigger questions of life, like,
Mhm.
what am I here for? What happens after you die? Things like that. And it really, again, changes your perspective on life.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we're talking about changing perspectives because really, whenever we're faced with life or death situations, the situation itself, we really don't get much of a like 10-second, like, do you want to do this or not kind of thing, right? It's
Hmm.
very much a split second decision. But then, whenever we have those things that really just seem to trudge on, such as a chronic illness or something,
Yeah.
it gives us that time to really reflect. And that's
Yeah.
the moment that our perspective is able to shift, I think. But a
Right.
lot of people don't really shift it. Why do you think that is?
Why people don't really shift their perspective?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think a lot of it depends on your intention when you go into, I can speak for dark tourism more
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
I think when people go in with a lot of empathy, a lot of reverence for those places,
Mm-hmm.
um, it will change your life. But if you go in and just like treat Auschwitz like a museum and you don't
Mm-hmm.
really absorb Auschwitz. Or if you go to even a cemetery and you just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's a nice headstone. That's a, blah, blah, but if you go in there and like, oh, look at those dates. I mean, I wonder
Mm-hmm.
what their life was like. They only lived for, they died when they were 20 years old and,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have anybody with the same last name by them or, you just
Yeah.
start asking questions
Mm-hmm.
and the more you reflect on things, the more it comes back to help you. But if you
Mm-hmm.
go through and just, check off, if you go through like a tourist,
Uh-huh.
maybe that's a good example. If you just go to these places like a tourist,
Uh-huh.
you're not going to get much out of it other
Mm.
than, hey, I was there, check it off the list. But if you
Yeah.
go in and really absorb it, it,
Mm-hmm.
it changes your life. And I think the same goes for people that, have had diseases and things. If you go through with kind of more of an open mindset rather than just being so wrapped up into death and well my a great
Mm.
example was is how I treated my autoimmune illness
Okay.
with anxiety rather
Mm.
than with more of a stoic mindset, which is
Mhm.
basically the same thing as a serenity prayer is a stoic
Mhm.
mindset was, change what you can. And if you can't change it, accept it
Mhm.
and let go of that fear of death. Your fear of death isn't keeping you alive. It actually makes you
Mm.
more likely to die, and so but it took a shift in my perspective for me to get there. And I think dark
Mm.
tourism allowed me to shift that perspective.
Okay. And real quick, which place would you say is your so far top favorite place that has shifted your perspective the biggest? Would it be Auschwitz?
Um,
Or was
so
that just sorry.
it's hard to say because you get pieces. It's hard to compare because it's like, how do you compare,
Mhm.
Auschwitz with Hiroshima per se, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because when I went through Hiroshima, okay, I go
Mhm.
through as an American. I'm there with,
Mhm.
almost exclusively Japanese people there. A
Mhm.
lot of school children there.
Mhm.
It's like that was my country that nuked a civilian population,
Yeah.
and you see how terrifying that is, and you go
Mhm.
through, and I went through, and I just felt really, as an American, you feel guilty going through there. I don't care if you thought it was justified or not. You still
Mhm.
feel horrible hearing those
Mm.
stories, and it wasn't justified, but that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like, how do you compare? But it changed. So, and then the Whitney plantation, even. So,
Mm.
the Whitney plantation down by New Orleans, it's about
Uh-huh.
45 minutes out of New Orleans. And as far as I know, it's the only plantation that really exclusively tells the story of a plantation through the slavery point of view,
Hmm.
and you learn about the children and there's several memorials in there,
Mhm.
and it really talks about how horrifying it was,
Mhm.
and it really, it's still a beautiful plantation, but at the same
Yeah.
time it really downplay. So like the main house is just a
Mhm.
walkthrough area. You don't spend any time in the main house. You literally just walk through it. And
Huh.
I'm sure that's done on purpose because
Yeah.
they don't want to glorify the antebellum South. They want to
Mhm.
show like how horrific it was. So
Yeah.
and it talked a lot about the children.
Mhm.
And and you think about narratives of slavery, you don't think about the children all that much, but
Mhm.
there you do. And there's a lot
Mhm.
of statues of children, and there's a whole
Hmm.
children's memorial. And you get out of there, and you're just more dedicated to helping kids. It's like, I don't care what race you are. It's like, I just wanted to help kids more after that,
Mhm.
and and also fight for injustices and and that type of thing. But
Mhm.
um so No, kinda I can answer your question, though, probably what was the most life-changing, and it probably was Auschwitz, though. Walking through that
Okay.
basement in Auschwitz was probably the I talk about it as probably that's probably the closest place to hell I've ever been.
Oof.
I mean, I've been in a different, personal hell
Mhm.
in other places, when
Mhm.
divorce and, things like that, but,
Yeah.
um, in terms of a physical place, that was probably the closest place to hell I've ever been, and
Mm.
you can't help but being changed.
Yeah, and that's really scary to really say too. And here's one thing that I'm kind of curious to hear your opinion on, because it's one of those things where we're able to sit there and say this is a historical site and this is what happened, right? But what happens whenever the victor decides to erase that part of history? What
Yeah.
happens if we lose a section of such a great tragedy that we're suddenly able to forget it per se? But
Mhm.
there's the thing is that we don't really forget it because that's intergenerational trauma that happened, and so it's in the human bloodline regardless of any tragedy that it is, right?
Yeah, you are hitting on so many things that I talk about in my book. Where so the Native American, I work 2 days a week at a clinic on a
Mhm.
reservation,
Mm,
and there's
okay.
a Native American belief that trauma is passed down 7 generations before it resolves. Um,
Mm.
Through the study of epigenetics, which
Uh-huh.
is how your genes are changed after a trauma and how that actually influences generations, and it
Uh-huh.
does. So your trauma can affect your great 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 grandchildren,
Mm.
and it takes about 7 generations. So the Native Americans are right, it takes about seven
Huh.
generations before trauma resolves through how DNA is expressed through
Huh.
epigenetics.
Wow.
So yeah, it's uh, kind of getting back to what you're saying too, is going to Berlin. So
Uh-huh.
Germany, and I was actually when I was in Africa,
Uh-huh.
I was the only American. I went by myself, but I met
Mm.
up with a tour group, and we spent 2 weeks camping in the Serengeti and
Mhm.
throughout places in Kenya and Tanzania. But
Uh-huh.
I was with a couple of Chinese people and a few Belgians, and there were four Germans,
Mhm.
and we talked about because they're very aware of American politics,
Hey.
and one thing that I talk about is in my book too is
Mhm.
Germany is really good at not forgetting their past. They don't glorify the Nazis, but they
Mhm.
tell the story. You go to Berlin, they have all kinds of memorials and monuments and
Mm.
museums and places where you can reflect on the horrors of fascism and the
Mhm.
Nazis.
Mm.
And there's a place called the Topography of Terror, which it
Hmm.
talks about the 1920s and 30s Berlin, and then how
Uh-huh.
getting into World War II, um, and how Hitler came to power, and it
Mhm.
talked about how they banned books, how he started a police force in the major cities, and
Mhm.
then started and under crime, so he wanted to fight crime in the major cities, especially Berlin,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden he started arresting his political rivals.
Mhm.
So the people in Germany, and I'm not, I'm trying not to be political, but
Yep,
the
yep.
people from Germany in my tour group, they
Uh-huh.
actually were when I had mentioned that, I how I felt about, American politics,
Mhm.
and they said, "Oh my gosh, we're so relieved that you say that because we wanted to ask you so bad that, you know." So they're but what they're saying is
Um,
what's happening in 1930s Berlin is happening in the United States right now, and
yeah.
everybody in the whole world sees it plain as day except the Americans.
Yep.
And I don't want that. I mean, I don't want to be political. I'm trying not to be political, but that is
Yeah.
reality of what was being said.
Yeah.
And going to places like the Whitney Plantation, and we
Mhm.
can't we can't forget our history
Mhm.
of Native American genocide and
Mhm.
slavery, and we
Yep.
can't minimize that stuff.
Nope.
Otherwise, you know, uh,
It
you
repeats.
know, yeah, yeah. We
Yeah.
need to listen to historians and social scientists, and not
Mhm.
politicians and political pundits.
Yeah. Oh, I 100% wholeheartedly agree. And what's that other saying? If history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And that's
Yeah,
the thing is that I don't know many stanzas that can rhyme with fascism. and still not be fascism. So
Right.
it's
Right.
but and that's a scary thing, right? Because whenever we're sitting here in the 1920s, 1930s Berlin of sorts, we're also
Mhm.
kind of sitting here going like, well, shit. What can we maybe do in this regard, right? Because I
Yeah.
know for myself growing up, I was always like, what would I have done during those times? And it's right here, right now. And it's like, oh, well, I'm doing a podcast, but this is something that is hopefully something that will help people along the lines because this is a way to heal, right? Because if we also sit there and I'm glad that you brought up the Native American genocide and stuff because
Mhm.
if we forget that, we're bound to do it again and again and again in
Yeah.
some way,
Yeah.
shape, or form.
Exactly. It
And
might not be the same exact way, you know, I mean,
mhm,
I don't think we're gonna ever see slavery the way we saw it in the past, but
mm-mm,
we could definitely see, you know,
mm,
races being
mhm,
very much, kind of, we pay them minimum wage and they're all the, the privileged,
mhm,
the half of the white folks, are making millions of dollars on the backs of everybody else.
mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
technically not slavery, but it is,
Yeah, and that's the thing is that they're going to try to find it because we're more educated or we should be, and they're going to try to find another way to drape the veil over our faces per se.
Oh yeah,
And that's why it's so important, I think, to change our perspectives on things because if we always look at the same thing with the same perspective all the time, I know for myself, I would be dead. I would be dead a long time ago, and there's
yeah,
no like nothing I could have done after that.
yeah,
But I had something that shook my life to its core, and my perspective changed ever since then.
yeah.
And you had something very similar, but now we're trying to help people realize that there's something good that comes out of the dark, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people who have gone through addiction talk about their rock bottom moments.
Mhm.
And do we want our country to hit a rock bottom
No,
moment
fuck
before we
no.
change?
No.
No. Do we need
Uh-uh.
another civil war? Because that's got to be rock bottom when you have a civil war.
Mhm.
And do we need another civil war
No.
before we realize that our country's fucked up?
Yeah.
And yeah. So
It's
I think another perspective to see is
Mhm.
when what the bar for fascism is, and
Mhm.
it's when people are more afraid to say something than
Mhm.
they are, because they're worried about the repercussions if they do say something.
Mhm.
And the
Oh, yeah.
thing is we all need to be talking and saying something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we are a fascist society.
Yeah. Oh, I'm really, really glad that you brought that up too, because it's one of those things that normally we don't try to get political on the show because it's one of those things like, hey, we're trying to deal with mental health. But whenever we're
Mhm.
dealing with it in such a blatant, obvious kind of thing, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if we ignore it, then we're actually just helping it along its way, right?
Okay, so I'm a therapist.
Uh huh.
And I work with people every day, and I will
Uh huh.
tell you the main thing right now affecting the majority of people is the
Hmm.
politics. I don't care what side of the aisle you
Yeah.
are
Uh huh.
on, it is affecting your mental health right now
Yeah.
more than anything else. I mean, yes,
Hmm.
people come in and they've had, sexual trauma or
Hmm.
an anxiety disorder or depression. Yeah, there's certain things, somebody died, whatever. I mean, that's
Hmm.
affecting their mental health. But if you look at what is the main thing across the board, it is politics right
Politics.
now.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So, is there something that you can take from your dark tourism and apply it to those politics in a sense? Or is that really just the quickest draw that we can do right now is between what's going on in America in 1920s and 30s Berlin, Germany?
So I think what makes humans more than animals,
Mm,
what the greatest thing that humans have is our ability to predict.
mm,
And it's when we predict accurately
mm.
that we kind of get this homeostasis and the human ecosystem, becomes stable again.
Uh-huh.
And we need to start looking at science, looking at data, looking at things that are just, realistic and not be fooled by Facebook algorithms and,
Mhm.
other social media and politicians and pundits. And because
Mhm.
they have an agenda. We
Yeah.
need to look at data And when you
Mhm.
do that and you can predict things right,
Uh-huh.
that will create a stable world. But
Mm.
and the thing is too is if you look at the history of the world, good
Mhm.
always wins, but it
Yeah.
might wipe out a whole generation of people.
Mhm.
World War II killed how many, millions of people.
Mhm.
World War One. I mean, and you can go
Mhm.
back all,
Long time ago.
but it always good wins
Mhm.
eventually.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that's really good to highlight too, because whenever we're dealing with this political climate, whenever we're dealing with our own morality, especially in the moment, it's one of those
Mhm.
things that it's good to know that even if I'm not here, the good will eventually
Yeah,
reign supreme, you know.
absolutely.
Be
Absolutely.
and oh, go ahead.
No, well, well, I think I'm just echoing what you're saying is, we're if we are not here, and that's the thing is we can't fear our own deaths. I mean,
Mm.
you don't do anything stupid that's going to get you killed, but we can't fear our own deaths because if we do, you
Mhm.
know, we're not going to get out of our comfort zone to help people, and
Yeah.
we need to get out of our comfort zone, speak up,
Mhm.
um, and let people know that we think things are fucked up, and
Mhm. Yeah.
things need to change. And when we do that, other
Mhm.
people hear you and they feel
Mhm.
comforted by your words also.
Mhm.
And if I'm not here tomorrow, the world will, at some point again stabilize and be good again. But
Yeah. May
let's
take
not
a
let it
little
get bad. Yeah,
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 let's not let it get bad, and hopefully, if it does get a little bit more turbulent, it settles down pretty quick, but it's one of those things that whenever we are struck with tragedy or the things like that, humans have a really good tendency to kind of pull together, right? And that's another
yeah,
thing that the darkness or the hard times really do a good thing about is bringing people together, showing people their strengths, right? Even though it may seem impossible per
yeah.
se.
I mean, even going through Auschwitz, I mean, most everybody who went there, they died as soon as they got there. They got off a
Mhm.
train, and then the doctor said, if you don't look healthy, you go right to the gas chamber. If you look
Mhm.
healthy, maybe you'll live for a few months.
Mhm.
Um, but some people made it through Auschwitz,
Yeah.
and so not all these dark places. I mean, they're dark, but some
Mhm.
people made it through. My favorite book is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning,
Huh.
where he was a psychiatrist who ended up being a doctor while he was in
Mhm.
Auschwitz, but he was a Jew, and he was kept alive because he was a doctor. But he
Mhm.
um, s- um, created this theory called logotherapy, which is
Hmm.
basically meaning. Logos
Oh, yeah.
Latin for the word meaning,
Uh-huh.
and what he found is that people that saw their suffering as a kind of a test of themselves, and they had meaning to go on. It might be something,
Hmm.
just to see if your family's even alive or dead. I mean,
Mhm.
but if they had something to live for, they
Mhm.
lived. And the people that just kind of didn't have anything to live for, where they just kind
Mhm.
of gave up hope, they died. And even with
Hmm.
suicidal clients,
Yeah.
people that have, if you can, as a therapist, but also as, if you're talking to anybody who's suicidal, if
Mhm.
you can give them hope in any way, shape, or form, that
Mhm.
is why people choose life. I mean,
Yeah.
even the smallest little bit of hope can cause people to hang on.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you said that too, because hope can be something that can it seems like it's gone sometimes, right? But
Yeah.
I've heard someone before, I don't remember where this was, but there's the term, it's from Fall Out Boy song, I'm hopelessly hopeful,
Okay.
and I heard that before and I was like, ooh, I like that. I'm hopelessly hopeful. Like, you're never
Uh,
going to not find me hopeless. Like, I may be down, I may be in the mud, I may be broken completely and not able to move, but there's a part of me that's going to be like, well, at least there's something that will happen from this. I don't know what,
yeah.
but
Exactly.
and it sucks though because sometimes it does kind of literally drag you through the mud and you have to just kind of ride out the ride and
Yeah. Yeah.
You,
There's some in mental health we call, surf, or, you just, you ride those emotions out. You ride them like you ride your emotions like they're a wave going in the shore, but they're eventually
Mhm.
they're gonna simmer out and fizzle away. And
Yeah.
everything in a person's life, for the most part, not everything, but most
Mhm.
everything, um, you're going to recover from. Nobody stays shitty forever. I mean, so it usually gets better. There are
Uh-huh.
certain cases where somebody has a terminal illness and you're 100% going to die, and
Mhm.
and then trying to muster dignity
Mhm.
and not fearing death and being strong, and that
Mhm.
is the meaning in their life maybe at that point, and just dying
Yeah.
with dignity.
Mm.
So even
Yeah.
in the worst of circumstances, you can still have hope and meaning, and
Yeah.
that's what keeps people going.
Yeah. And so what was one of the things that kind of kept you going whenever you were kind of in the thick of it all?
Oh, good question. I think when I was going to a lot of these dark tourism spots,
Mhm.
my life really, like I talk, they're little mirrors that emerge when you go to Auschwitz, and you go to
Mhm.
Hiroshima, when you go to Whitney Plantation. I mean,
Yeah.
I talk about maybe 75 places around the world, and
Oh,
all of
wow.
those places have given me reflections.
Mhm.
Um, and what became crystal clear to me is the reason that I am on this earth is my family and friends, and my helping people.
Mhm.
Those are really the two things: is my family, friends, and helping people is what keeps me going. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
hobbies and things I enjoy. I love to travel, love all kinds of things, but I love aviation. I'm a private pilot,
Oh.
but that isn't my meaning of life. My meaning of
Mhm.
life is helping people and loving my friends and family.
Gotcha. So you're kind of able to catch that glimpse of your purpose while you were doing the dark tourism, right? So
Yeah.
do you think that you would have actually came across that same discovery without it?
Well, if you would have asked me that question 10 years ago, I probably would have gave you the same answer.
Okay.
But the difference
Uh-huh.
is when you go to these places,
Mhm.
you feel it. So you feel these
Ooh.
places, and so I could have told you what my meaning of life was, but I didn't
Mhm.
necessarily feel it as deep as I do now, as I did after I
Ooh.
walked through Auschwitz. As so
Mhm.
life has changed when you
Yeah.
go through these places,
Mhm.
and you know, uh, people maybe are familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
and then you
Yep.
have your regular intelligence, basically
Mhm.
how smart you are,
Yeah.
and um, people that are successful in life, what tends to be more important is your emotional intelligence.
Mm.
And when you go through these places, it ingrains in a part of your brain,
Hmm.
it sears in your brain, in the emotional parts of your brain,
Mhm.
that those lessons are always there. And they help me at, for
Hmm.
example, I went through the Churchill war rooms, and I went to Parliament and reflected on Churchill giving his "We will fight on the beaches" speech.
Mhm.
And knowing how much that motivated England and the UK during their darkest hours,
Uh-huh.
and they were kind of on their heels versus the Nazis. They were getting close
Mhm.
to I don't want to say
Uh-huh.
they're defeated, but they were getting it was getting closer to
Yeah.
being defeated.
Mhm.
And when I was going through my liver transplant, and I was starting to recover, I was in so
Uh-huh.
much pain. I mean, I was slit from side to side, and
Mm.
even though I was feeling better, I could tell my life was different. I still was in a
Mhm.
lot of pain from my actual surgery,
Uh-huh.
and I just remember Churchill's words came to me, just like, "When you're going through hell, keep going, and when you're walking through hell, keep walking." And
Mhm.
that I could hear Churchill in my brain all the time, and I would just pop out of bed, and I'd conjure up like how it felt back in England, in the
Mhm.
1940s.
Mhm.
And like even before that, I was called down to the University of Minnesota because that's where I had my
Mhm.
transplant. So I was called down there. They had a liver for me, um, and there was a delay. So
Mm.
I remember, like, okay, there was a delay in Normandy. They were
Mhm.
because of the weather. They didn't hit the beaches. They um, it they delayed it one day,
Mhm.
and so I was delayed.
Uh-huh.
And I started thinking, I felt comforted by, like, okay, they had a lot of anxiety. They knew what they're getting into now because the cat was out of the bag, and they had this delay, and I'm
Mhm.
having a delay. And then actually, my my liver fell through, so I
Oh,
didn't get it,
no.
and
Mm.
so I got a call in the middle of the night from the doctor, and that was
Mm.
actually the closest I ever, like, I didn't have a whole lot of cravings for after I quit drinking,
Uh-huh.
but oh my god, if I had a beer at that exact moment when the doctor told me you're not getting a liver, because I was like,
Mm.
why am I fucking doing this? Like, why?
Mhm.
Like, at that
Yeah.
time I could hardly breathe because the fluid around my lungs was just, it was making me. I mean, I could
Mm.
hardly breathe. I was yellow.
Yeah.
Like, I was felt
Ugh.
so bad. All I wanted
Ugh.
was that liver transplant,
Yeah.
and I didn't get it, but and I thought, like, their job was after that, initial, like, shock, and I had
Mhm.
a craving for like 2 minutes,
Yeah.
uh, but after that initial shock, I started thinking about the people at Normandy again. It's like their job was to get to the beaches and fight on. My job was to get to the transplant and fight on. And I
Yeah.
got a call a week later, and I was transplanted, and it was
Yeah.
everything worked out.
Okay. And I love that for you. And I love that because it really does kind of highlight the like history repeats itself, but not necessarily in the exact
Exactly.
same. It
Yeah,
does
you're right.
rhyme.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it rhymes, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
it echoes. It echoes. I mean,
uh-huh.
history echoes, and that was a way that it echoed. I felt like by paying my respects at Normandy, by paying my
Mhm.
respects at Auschwitz, all the cemeteries I've been to, and
Mhm.
reflecting on people's hardships in their lives,
Mhm.
it came back to help me
Yeah.
when I was going through those darkest hours.
Yeah. Do you kind of subscribe to anything a little woo-woo?
Yeah. What do you mean by woo woo?
Well, I mean, whenever we have something such as a Holocaust or a
Yeah.
genocide or whatever, there's, of course, the theories and everything, whatever we want to call them, but it's supposed to scar the land and scar the
Mhm.
energy in that area. And you had said that while you're going through those spots, it kind of sears it in your mind, sears it
Yeah.
on your brain,
Yeah.
and it's something that you also said you can feel it, like it's a tangible feeling.
Yeah.
So it does kind of make me wonder, like, how much of that is actually like holds credence, because the Native Americans were correct in us uh being able to resolve intergenerational trauma through 7 generations, which is actually
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
So how do we know that what you're saying isn't actually just someone, or that energy kind of came along with you and is like they're pushing you forward through those hard times, because it's like,
Yeah.
hey, I didn't make it, but I know you can, you know?
Okay. So I'm a social scientist, so I look at, like, what is the actual evidence.
Uh-huh.
So in my personal life, I
Mhm.
had an experience where I was at the Vatican, and
Mhm.
I saw the Pope, and there's this belief in Catholicism that, like, oh, if you're blessed by the Pope, you're
Mhm.
you're you're covered for like 90 days once you go back home. I mean, it's like, yeah, and I'm thinking at the time, yeah, right. Okay, so, and I write
Uh-huh.
about this in my book, is
Okay.
because I write about the ghost chapter,
Mhm.
and I've been to haunted places around the world. A few
Uh-huh.
months ago, I stayed in Lizzie Borden's bedroom. I
Ooh.
stayed there by myself in Lizzie Borden's bedroom. I was
Shit.
actually in the house by myself for a couple hours.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, vibes. You get vibes,
Ooh.
without a doubt. You get vibes. Is
Icky.
that vibes because of my own mind, or is that vibes? But
Uh-huh.
after I was at the Vatican, though, I was
Uh-huh.
driving to work. It was super foggy. You
Mhm.
couldn't see 10 feet in front of you, barely.
Yeah.
And so I'm driving to work,
Mhm.
and I hear this voice in my head. I don't hear voices. I heard this voice
Mhm.
in my head. It said, "Chad, slow down. There's a car coming at you." And I was freaked out. I was like, "Oh my God, was that God? Was that, was that my own imagination?" But it was a thought inserted in my brain that almost
Uh-huh.
was vocalized. I couldn't tell you
Uh-huh.
if it was an actual voice, or if it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
a thought inserted. And
Mhm.
there's a concept in mental illness called thought insertion, where people think
Mhm.
they have thoughts. But anyway, so I did
Yeah.
slow down. I slowed down big time, and I was white knuckling it at that time because it spooked
Uh-huh.
me. And within probably 20 seconds, no shit, there's a car flying at me in my lane. And had I not reacted so fast, had I not slowed down, 100% sure I would be dead. And there's a car full of kids. They're probably on their way to school.
Ugh.
And there's a car full of kids that, and they pulled over. I pulled
Mhm.
over. There's a car. I can't remember if the car is behind me or behind them, but there another
Mhm.
car pulled over, and we just sat there. And usually I'd be like, "You fucking idiot," and just. But I was so calm at that
Uh-huh.
point. I was like, "Oh my god, my that was that was God," you know. And I mean, there was something there, and
Uh-huh.
so now when I go through these places, it's
Mhm.
like that is in the back of my head. I mean, that just was too much of a coincidence. The one time
Mhm.
I ever heard voices in my head
Mhm.
saved my life,
Huh.
And so yeah, I do think there is something, but I talk about it as
Mhm.
like I just don't have enough
Yeah.
evidence, and
Yeah. Oh,
but
yeah.
you also have to have faith in things too, I guess.
Yeah, and
And I also think
uh-huh.
that when you go to religious places, you're on hallowed ground. You
Mhm.
go to Jerusalem, you're on hallowed ground. But
Mhm.
when you go to Auschwitz, when you go to plantations, when you go to 9/11, when you go to Pearl Harbor, when you go to
Mhm.
cemeteries, haunted places even,
Mhm.
where tragedies happened, you're on hallowed ground.
Yeah.
And by going there and honoring people and their suffering,
Mhm.
um, it does. I mean, there's something there is
Mhm.
some type of energy, but I couldn't tell you what that energy is.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting story because it's one of those that there's no way to prove or disprove, except for the sheer fact that you have a story to tell. And without that story, you may not be here. So
Yeah,
it's one of those that it has a huge personal impact to you. And because of that, other people should maybe be able to take notice of it. But at the
yeah,
same time, it's one of those things that whenever we're dealing with the supernatural or paranormal, whatever you want to call it, I
mhm,
think that everyone's personal relationship to it is just that. It is personal and up
yeah,
to interpretation
yeah,
to maybe an extent, but that's one thing is that we're always searching for the truth, and that can get a
yeah,
lot of people anxious. And sometimes, like you said, we just need to adopt that form of
yeah,
stoicism of saying like, this is what I can do, and everything else just fuck it, let it go.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this is just like almost too much of a coincidence. So I was a huge Jane Goodall fan.
Mm,
Jane Goodall died, what, 10 days ago or something, or a
mm,
couple weeks ago.
yeah.
So I wrote about her in the introduction of my book. I wrote about her being a
Huh.
big influence in my life, and I wrote about Viktor Frankl being a big influence in my life. Those two
Mhm.
people were huge influences in their memoirs, were major influences on Jane Goodall. Significantly influenced the way I look at spirituality.
Mm.
So anyway, I was in Africa, and
Uh-huh.
it's like, oh wow, I'm in Africa, same time Jane Goodall, same country that she
Yeah.
studied chimpanzees in.
Uh-huh.
And but anyway, we stopped for a bathroom break.
Mhm.
Um, I think it was 2 days after she passed away,
Mm,
and we
mm,
ended up being at the Uvalde, Gulch,
mm,
and it's like, I recognized the Uvalde Gulch, and sure enough, there's a plaque there and these 2 giant skulls up there, but it was where
mhm.
Louis Leakey, it's where Jane Goodall's story really starts, her
Huh.
her professional story, because she had always wanted to go to Africa, and
Uh-huh.
her ticket to go to Africa was Louis Leakey, who was studying, evolution, and he was digging up, you know, other species of humans,
Mhm.
and at that very gulch, and
Uh-huh.
they call it the cradle of life, that gulch, because
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
kind of where they believe maybe humanity really started,
Yeah.
and Jane Goodall he hired her to be his personal secretary. She was in her early
Huh.
20s, and she was his personal secretary there.
Uh-huh.
And I recognize it from her memoir. I'm like, oh my god, this is where Jane Goodall started her career. It was just
Huh.
like too much. It's like, what's the chances that that's where we're gonna stop to go to the bathroom?
Huh.
And it just, yeah, I was like choking up just driving away from there. It's like, I can't believe that just happened.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Yeah, yeah,
It's very strange how the world is both so vast and yet so small that we're able to have those kind of personal connections with someone that we've maybe never met face to face, and yet at the same
right.
time, we may be able to share that geographic location and be able to make that uh connection somehow.
Exactly. And that's what dark tourism's all about, is
Mm-hmm.
going to, places and having a personal connection with not only history, but the
Mm-hmm.
people that live that history.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go to the Tower of London, and that's where Henry VIII had Anne Boleyn beheaded, and Lady Jane Grey beheaded there, and
Mm-hmm.
you know many other people were beheaded at, and also you go there, and there was a prince, I can't remember his name, but two princes, and they were
Mm-hmm.
murdered by it was believed that they were murdered by their uncle, because they were going to inherit the kingdom, and instead the uncle murdered him, and he inherited the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
um, but anyway, you go there, and you know really reflect on their suffering, and
Mm-hmm.
when you do that, when you step in, on this hallowed ground, you really learn again on that emotional level, and it comes
Mm-hmm.
back to just influence your life in a good, positive way, even though it was a dark, really dark things that happened.
Yeah. And I think that there's something to be said about everything being hollowed ground, even though it may not be what is conventionally known as hollowed ground.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but with that being said, real quick, we are getting near the end of this episode. So, do you think that we could have you on in the future again? Because I don't think that we've really got far enough into dark tourism, what all it can offer, and what
Sure.
some other personal anecdotes you may have with it, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, would love to be on. Yeah,
Sweet.
been fun.
But before that, do you think that we got time for our little game show segment today?
Yeah, absolutely.
Alrighty. So, with that being said, Dr. Chad Scott, we're going to play a little game called Dark or Delightful. I'm
Dark or
going
delightful.
to name off a place, object, or experience, and I would like for you to decide whether it's dark, something that's connected to pain, shadow, or reflection, or something that's delightful, something that renews life, brings joy, levity, or heals. Now, if you want, you can also provide a short explanation, or you can just kind of leave it as is because
can,
you think
can
it
I
should
can I
be
say both, because I think there's a lot of things that are both.
exactly. You
Yeah.
definitely can. You can
Okay.
get uh maybe just don't say double D or double D. I guess that works either way.
Double D, double D. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so first up on our list, we've got visiting an abandoned asylum. Is that dark or delightful? Or does it?
Delight. I mean, it's dark and delightful, but yeah, I think that's definitely reflecting. I've done that. I went to the Nopaming Sanitarium, which isn't very far from here, and it's an
Oh,
abandoned. It's condemned now, but it's out
ooh,
in a lot of the ghost shows that have been through there,
mm-hmm,
and there's so much suffering. It
mm,
wasn't an asylum, actually. It was tuberculosis sanitarium, and
ooh,
but many people have died there, and
mm.
um, so it's very dark, but at the same time, the reflections you get, it can be a little, I don't know if delightful is the right word, but it can be meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I could have named this a little bit better, or defined it a little bit better, because some people think going to a cemetery is weird and creepy, and I love doing it on my free time. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but what about writing a letter to your past self?
That's delightful. Sure.
Okay.
Again, there might be some darkness in there, but yeah, I think the benefits of that, without a doubt, outweigh any darkness.
Okay. Now, what about eating alone at a candlelit restaurant?
Eating alone at a candlelit restaurant. Oh man. I do a lot of things alone. You know, I like doing things with people,
Uh-huh.
but I don't have a significant other right now, and it's like
Mhm.
I don't. I'll go. That might be a little weird, but sure, I'll call it delightful.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother level of confidence right there.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Or you could tell someone that you're just dating the ghost from next door and just have people just give you weird looks and they'd leave you alone.
Yeah, that reminds me of who are those two rappers that wear the clown makeup? The Insane
Oh,
Clown Posse. There's a
mhm.
song where a guy's dating a ghost. Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh,
It's a gross song, but
I haven't heard them in years. I didn't know
yeah,
they're still a thing. Oh
yeah.
boy. um, what about watching a thunderstorm roll in?
Oh, that's delightful for sure.
Okay. No, I don't think we need an explanation on that one, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh,
It's
what
beautiful.
about collecting old photographs though that aren't yours or your
That aren't
family's?
mine.
Yeah, or your family's.
I would say, well, so I got just looking at this, there's Lizzie Borden there.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. So I think, and I got that at the Lizzie Borden house. That's my souvenir I took. I like to get souvenirs. So, but
Yeah.
I think, um, it to me, I'll call it delightful, but
Mhm.
it's almost similar. I would think. I don't have a bunch of pictures of other people, but I mean, I have
Mhm.
lots of books that have probably pictures of people and things.
Mhm.
But um, going to like a rummage sale and you see a picture of of a like an old 1930s person or something, or
Uh-huh.
and you know have no idea what they are, but reflecting on like who was this person,
Mhm.
and trying to reflect on their life. I think that's, yeah, we'll call that delightful, because it's kind of like going through the catacombs. You didn't know any of those skeletons in there, but
Mhm.
they had a life. They had, again, people that loved them and what jobs. And it's like, it's kind of neat to look at a picture and just kind of like, hey, I wonder what that person was all about.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what about walking through a cemetery at sunrise?
Sunrise, gosh, I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know if
Yeah.
I've ever walked through a cemetery at sunrise. We'll
Me
call that
neither.
delightful because, hey, if you're early to rise, why not? Um,
Hopefully you're the only one there.
yeah, yeah. Sunrise, yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Sunset would be more fun, but
yeah, sunset is definitely more fun at the
yeah.
cemetery. But what about listening to your favorite sad song on repeat? Is that dark or delightful?
Hmm. It probably depends on the mood you're in, but
Fair.
if it's, I think, well, I'll call that delightful because,
Okay.
it might feel hard, but
Mhm.
sometimes feeling difficult things is healing. So any healing, I believe, is delightful. So
Ooh, I
yeah,
love that.
yeah.
And what about the last 10 minutes of a therapy session?
Hmm. If it's at the end of the day, I want to go home. It's very delightful, but usually, yeah, usually you wish you had a little bit more time to talk to people. So it's kind
Mhm.
of, I would say that's dark because I don't like when my sessions end. I wish I could keep talking to people.
Yeah, that is for sure. And that's kind of how I feel about this because it's not often that I find other people that are cemetery or dark place enthusiasts and have traveled the world to do so. And I'm a
Yeah.
little jealous on that
Yeah.
end.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I'm gonna say this to your listeners because a lot of people will say, and I've heard this a lot, like, "Why would you wanna go to those places?" and things, and,
Hmm.
and I would say give it a try, but you
Yeah.
don't have to go to the darkest place. You don't have to go to a place where genocide occurred. You don't have to,
Hmm.
just go to a local cemetery,
Hmm.
go visit a local memorial, and just step outside your comfort zone just a little bit in
Hmm.
terms of the darkness, because, again, it took me a little bit of time to get into the darker aspects, and in the more significant places.
Hmm.
um and I think because I started with maybe a cemetery and just kind of slowly built it up, I guess.
Hmm.
um I was able to have probably deeper reflections at the more significant places because of,
Mm.
because I didn't treat them as a museum anymore. I treated them as like, man, these are like really sacred places.
Yeah. Ooh, thank you for sharing that because that is something that I think we could all really get behind, right? Just expanding our comfort zone. We don't have to
Yeah,
necessarily break the comfort zone. We can expand it,
yeah,
but that takes
yeah.
some work.
Well, and I want to say this is, where, you're a mental health podcast.
Hmm.
Um, we have difficult things in our lives, traumas, and our default, the human default is to go into your comfort zone,
Hmm.
but what grows in a comfort zone? The only thing that grows in comfort zones is probably
Mold.
depression and anxiety and mold. Yeah. Um, Over time, if you stay in your comfort zone, your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then you just aren't living life anymore.
Hmm.
And um, So on the other side of that is reckoning. And if you reckon with your trauma, reckon
Mhm.
with the stressors in your life, it's hard. It's a lot harder than staying in your comfort zone. Staying in your
Yeah.
comfort zone is I don't want to say it's easy either, but it's a lot easier than reckoning. But
Mhm.
when you reckon with something, that's when you build, once you get through that other side and you get to the recovery, when you get
Mhm.
to, for example, like, you said you've been sober for 4 years.
Mhm.
Um, it's not easy at first, and it still might not be easy, but it's a lot
Yeah.
easier now than it was 4 years ago,
Yeah.
and
Uh,
but you have to go through a reckoning phase, and if you
mhm.
don't do that, you're much more likely to relapse, and
Mhm.
um, so you get through that other side, but you become much more emotionally intelligent. You become a
Mhm.
stronger human being. You're more resilient, and you're a better person because of the shit you went through in your life, and that's
Mhm.
where people that have gone through darkness, when they've gone through I mean, I wouldn't be the person I am had I not went through my divorce, had I not had my liver transplant, had I not had severe anxiety,
Mhm.
but I reckoned with it. I didn't stay in my comfort zone. I did something about it.
Mhm.
Um, and it's life changing.
Yeah, it is, and I'm so glad that you did do something with it because we got to have this awesome conversation, and we get to
Yeah,
have more in the
exactly.
future.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is fun.
Yeah, real quick, because you played our dark or delightful, I mean, it was technically dark and delightful, who am I
Do I get a
kidding?
parting gift?
You get the honorary title of the cartographer of shadows.
Oh,
Cartographer, sorry. The honorary title of the cartographer of shadows because you don't just visit the world's darkest corners, you map them, showing us where meaning still lives between the ruins. So,
oh,
I've
awesome.
got I've
That's
got one.
awescan
Yeah,
I
I've got
can I
one.
put that under my under my PhD, say cartographer
Yeah,
of darkness? Yeah, okay. All
yeah,
right.
go for it. And then if they ask where did you get that certificate from, they can always be directed to me, and I'll point them to this episode.
Awesome.
But
Yes. Yes.
uh, one last question though, Doctor Scott.
Yeah.
The name of this podcast is Retrieving Sanity, and we explore how all facets of living life impact mental health. Looking at the incredible motley adventures of your life, what does retrieving sanity personally mean to you today? And what's one practice or perspective you believe is crucial for anyone on that journey?
Reflection.
Ooh.
Reflection. When you if you just go through life and you don't reflect, you're not kind of goes to that whole prediction thing. If you don't reflect on things, your prediction is going to just flap in the wind, and you're going to go with whatever political pundit or whatever your buddy tells you. You're just going to go down that bad rabbit hole. But when you
Mhm.
reflect on things and you really look at things objectively, you're going to retrieve your sanity.
Mm. I love that. That's short, sweet, and to the point, and I think we could all use a little bit more reflection in our lives. But
Yes,
where
absolutely.
is what is the website that people can find you, your book, or get a hold of you if they need you?
Yeah, so my book is okay, so my website, you just threw it up there.
Sorry.
Dr. Chad Scott, yeah, drchadscott.com is my website, and you can find links to my book and learn about dark tourism and learn a little bit more about me. And if you want, I'm trying to market myself a little bit to, museums and historical sites and things that's where, um, for example,
Mhm.
instead of just talking about what happened there,
Mhm.
asking reflective questions to people, so they,
Mm.
kind of going back to the reflection thing, because
Yeah.
when you go there and you can learn things on an emotional level, and be able to attach it to your life somehow,
Mhm.
you can carry those, that what you learn there, and farther.
Mhm.
You can find my book pretty much anywhere you buy books.
Okay.
Uh, it's hit or miss whether it's in a bookstore near you or not, but you
Mm.
certainly can get it online at all the usual places. And
Okay.
it's also an audiobook.
Ooh.
I didn't read it, somebody else read it for me. I'm too clunky of a reader, so we had a professional actor read it.
Ah,
And yeah, and it's on Kindle too, so
nice.
yep. Yep.
Very cool. And thank you for sharing that information with us because I know that I'm going to have to check out the book and just read all about it because I mean, it's again not
Sounds like
often
it's
that
right up your alley.
it's right up my
It's
alley.
mental health slash dark tourism, and yeah,
Yep.
there you go.
Yes. So I just got to say again, thank you for everything that you've done, not only for the world, but for yourself, because you help provide more for the world. And it's just awesome that we get to have these kind of conversations to
You
hopefully help
know,
other people.
I'll take it, but I'm gonna throw that right back at you. Thank you. We need more voices like yours to shed light on this stuff.
Well, thank you. And
Yeah.
again, we're just two peens in a pod. That's not how it
Pe-
goes.
Beans, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Everyone knows what
I
I'm
know.
trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, with that being said, unfortunately, we are at the end of this episode, but everyone else out there, be sure to check us out next week. And thank you for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. This has been Keegan, and this has been Dr. Chad Scott. Dr. Chad
You
Scott.
just broke something.
It just knocked a lighter off my desk. But
Oh,
this has been Dr. Chad Scott, and we will see y'all somewhere along some shadowy places. And hopefully, you've done some reflecting until then. But remember, if you've got a mental health crisis, give the number 988 a call and be sure to love yourself, love others if you can, but you've got to love yourself first. And we will see
absolutely.
you next week. And Dr. Chad Scott, thank you again for being on the show. And
Thanks for having me, Keegan. It's been great.
of course, and everyone out there, once again, have a good night. Shalom.